said, so today people will be doing the third aspect of the physics, that is electronics. So basically in these three demo lectures, my plan was to make you aware that be it mathematical physics or be it modern physics or be it electronics, um, I will try my best to to impart you the knowledge from all these different aspects of physics that we have. So today what we are going to learn is a chapter which physicists might just not like that much, but at the same time it depends on how you learn that chapter, whether it becomes interesting or not to you. And the chapter is called as people semiconductors. So let me know if at all you were like कि अरे यार semiconductors पढ़ना पड़ेगा या something like that. If you have that feeling right now, please let me know. But don't worry, we'll enjoy this chapter today. We'll try our best that we learn and understand this chapter. Please remember, people, semiconductors is the fundamental of solid state physics. In your masters, you will have a complete subject on solid state physics, people. Okay, so if you don't understand semiconductors, solid state physics will just go bouncer to you all. So let's get started with the chapter. The chapter's name, like I said, is everybody semiconductors. Here we go. The chapter's name, people, is called as semiconductors. To start with, I have a question for you all. The question is, what are semiconductors, people? I mean, देखो, school level definition, you guys say that sir, conductors are those materials which conduct electricity. And then you would say, sir, insulators are those materials which do not conduct electricity. Then what are semiconductors? कभी कभी करता है, कभी कभी नहीं करता है. Like they conduct at times, they does not conduct at times. What are they then? Like how do you understand semiconductors? What are they then? Conductors conducts, insulators does not conduct. Then what are semiconductors? So people, they conduct electricity, but on demand, as demanded. Like you ask semiconductors to generate a current of 1 milliampere, and voila, it will generate 1 milliampere. If you ask them to conduct electricity for a current of, let's say, 2 amperes, yes, it will conduct current of 2 amperes. So basically you demand the value, you ask the value, and semiconductors will give you that value, people. Semiconductors conduct electricity as demanded, people. Semiconductors conduct electricity as demanded. Okay, so basically semiconductors, people, can be controlled. Semiconductors can be controlled. Is that, and this is the reason that all the chips that we use, all the chips in our mobiles or in our laptops, wherever we have used any sort of electronic devices, most of them are made up of semiconductors, people, because these semiconductor chips can be controlled. That is the idea that we use semiconductors, people. Okay, so but still, if at all I want to define a semiconductor, then how would I define it? I cannot really say, right, that semiconductors conduct electricity as demanded, and hence we define it like that way. So we cannot really define it that way. To start with, let us first learn difference between a quantity which is called as PTC and NTC. So what is PTC, people? I hope you are aware of PTC and NTC. So PTC is an acronym for positive temperature coefficient. Positive temperature coefficient. Positive temperature coefficient. And NTC, everybody, is an acronym for negative temperature coefficient. Negative temperature coefficient. Okay. Now, what does they exactly mean? People, positive temperature coefficient materials, PTC materials, positive temperature coefficient materials, are actually those materials whose resistance increases with increase in temperature. If you increase the temperature, people, then the resistance will increase. If you decrease the temperature, then resistance will decrease. This actually happens in conductors, people. Conductors are PTC in nature. Conductors are PTC in nature. And why? Look here. So what are conductors, people? Basically, conductors have got lot of free electrons. Like there are electrons which are just freely available. So if you increase the temperature, the random motion of the free electrons increases. And if the random motion of the free electrons increases, what will happen? Collision will increase, people. And if the collision will increase, it means what? Resistance increases. Is that clear? So in case of conductors, if you increase the temperature, the collision increases because the random motion increases, and hence I can say that resistance increases, people. Please remember, the conductors are PTC. Conductors are PTC. Okay. Now, around in the year of 1821, there was a scientist named Seebeck. He found a material where he saw that if we increase the temperature, the resistance of that particular material was decreasing, people. Now, this is a very fascinating property, a very fascinating property. Because understand, tell me one thing, what is easier in this world? Is it easier to generate fire or is it easier to make an ice? Obviously, it is very much easier to generate fire, right? Like to increase the temperature, it's very, very, very much easy. Let's just hold on. Yes. So I was saying, to generate fire, people, to generate fire, it is very much easier in this world rather than, you know, to generate ice. To increase the temperature, it is much more easier. And hence this property, when, you know, if you're increasing the temperature, the resistance is decreasing. What does it mean? The conductivity increases. Conductivity increases. And tell me, if at all you are finding a material where if you increase the temperature, the conductivity increases, that is such a big news. Because what we want, all we want is electricity, all we want is current. Our life is surrounded by electricity and current, and if we can generate the more current, if we increase the conductivity of any material just by increasing the temperature, that is a very fascinating discovery. So this discovery by Seebeck led to many more speculations. Later, around in the year of 1833, it was Michael Faraday, people. It was Michael Faraday who actually named this material as semiconductors. Michael Faraday said that the materials which in which resistance decreases with increase in temperature, we will call it semiconductors. And the first material that they found was everybody's silver sulfide. The first material that they found was silver sulfide, which is Ag2S. It is Ag2S. This is a semiconductor, people. Yes, semiconductors are not only silicon and germanium. They are only elemental semiconductors, people. These are called as compound semiconductors. This Ag2S, silver sulfide, everybody, this is a compound semiconductor. Semiconductors are of various types, okay? They can be elemental, they can be compound, they can be organic. So compound semiconductors was the first type of semiconductors which they discovered, in which the resistance decreases if you increase the temperature. And that was a revolutionary discovery, people. That was a revolutionary discovery. Such materials are called as what, people? NTC, negative temperature coefficient, where you increase the temperature, the resistance decreases. Is that clear, everybody? Is that clear? Now, is the difference between PTC and NTC clear? And now, do you understand the significance of the semiconductors now? That if you increase the temperature, the resistance of them decreases, people. And that is a revolutionary discovery when it comes to semiconductors. So I hope that finally, after how many years, 20 years or something, it's clear in your head that what exactly are semiconductors, people. Okay, so semiconductors are basically those materials which can be called as NTC, in which the temperature increases, the resistance decreases, and also we can control them. Okay. Great. Okay, next. So just because I mentioned the types of semiconductor, let me just talk about it again. So basically, people, semiconductors are of three types. One which is elemental semiconductors, in which we have silicon and germanium. And then we have got compound semiconductors, in which we have mostly zinc sulfide or silver sulfide, something like that. And then we have organic semiconductors, materials like anthracene. And just hold on. Yes, anthracene. This is an organic semiconductor, people. Our focus in this chapter is majorly on elemental semiconductors. We will talk about silicon and germanium in detail. Okay, we'll talk about silicon and germanium in detail, everybody. Let's just recall a few things about silicon and germanium, people. The electronic configuration, the atomic number of silicon is, everybody, 14, and the atomic number of germanium is 32. So the electronic configuration of this is 2, 8, 4, and the electronic configuration of this is 2, 8, 8, 2, 8, 18, and then 14 people. I hope you are aware that we usually write the order 2, 8, 8, 18, 18, 32, 32. This should be the order of complete octet people. Like this is the most stable material that we can find. Okay. So always we first have to finish 2 and then 8 and then 8 and then we jump to 18. So we have finished 2, 8, 8, which is 2 plus 8 is 10, 10 plus 8 is 18. Now 32 minus 18 is 14 people. So this is the fourth shell. This is the fourth shell. 2, 8, 8, 14. That is germanium, everybody. Okay. Next. So now let us learn something which is going to be of utmost importance to learn different types of semiconductors, and we call it trivalent materials, trivalent elements and pentavalent elements. Trivalent and pentavalent. People, there is a common misconception when it comes to trivalent and pentavalent. You usually say that trivalent atoms are those atoms in which the last shell has how many people? 3 electrons. And you say the last shell here has how many people? 5 electrons. People, this is a very incorrect idea of trivalent and pentavalent. The trivalent will have 3 electrons and pentavalent will have 5 electrons in the last shell. No, people, it is incorrect. It is wrong. So what is the correct thing about trivalent and pentavalent? Let me just clear this to you all. Please remember this code which I'm going to give you to remember all the trivalent material which are going to be useful to us. Bagi. You can remember Bagi, people. B for boron. Okay. A for aluminium. G for gallium. And I for indium. So these 4 are, people, trivalent impurities. These 4 are trivalent impurities. And for pentavalent, you can remember PAN. You can remember PAN. Okay. So N, everybody, stands for nitrogen. N stands for nitrogen. And then in order, P stands for phosphorus. A stands for arsenic. And the another A stands for antimony. So these are the codes that I use to remember them. Obviously, I don't have by hearted the whole periodic table, but I have by hearted these many values which I require in physics. Okay. So Bagi are the materials which comes under trivalent, and PAN are the materials which come under trivalent. Okay. So boron has, people, atomic config. Boron has atomic number 5. Aluminum has atomic number 13. Gallium has atomic number 31, and indium has atomic number 49. Nitrogen, people, has atomic number 7. Phosphorus has atomic number 15, arsenic has atomic number 33, and antimony has atomic number 51. Well, if at all you are wondering that, sir, how will we be able to by heart these values? People, I haven't by hearted these values. Okay, I haven't by hearted periodic table beyond 20 or 30 elements. Okay, but I still remember these values because there is a trick to by heart them. Just remember this. You just remember the first 2 values, 5 and 7, and then 5 plus 8 is 13. 13 plus 18 is 31. 31 plus 18 is 49, people. You add 8 first and then you add 18 first and then you add 18 again. Okay. Similarly here, people, 7 plus 8 is 15. 8 plus 18 is 33, and 33 plus 18 is 51, people. So you can just remember these values. I hope this way you will be able to remember the atomic number of all these 8 elements. These are of more significance. Okay, please remember these atomic numbers, everybody. So now let us write the electronic configurations as well. I can write 5 as 2, 3. I can write 13 as 2, 8, 3. I can write 18 as 2. I can write 31 as 2, 8, 8, 13. And I can write 49 as 2, 8, 8. And then 18 and then 13. I've already given you the order, people. You first have to finish 2, 8, 8, 18, 18, 32, 32. You have to go in this order. So first finish 8 and then finish 8 and then finish 18 and likewise. Okay. So even here, let us write the configurations. The configuration for nitrogen will be 2, 5. Configuration for phosphorus will be 2, 8, 5. Configuration for arsenic will be 2, 8, 8, 15, and configuration for antimony will be 2, 8, 8, 18, 15. You can just simply check. Now, What was the definition? You were thinking that trivalent atom, sir, it basically has 3 electrons in their outermost orbit. Now just see if at all your definition was correct, people. Yes, this one has 3 electrons in the outermost orbit. This is trivalent. This also has 3 electrons in the outermost orbit. It is trivalent. People, this has 13 electrons in the outermost orbit. This also has 13 electrons in the outermost orbit. So do you, your definition of trivalent since childhood, that it should have 3 electrons in the outermost orbit, people, it is completely incorrect. Even all these pentavalent, you have always thought that pentavalent basically has 5 electrons in the outermost orbit. No, look at this. It has 5 electrons here. It has 5 electrons here. Yes, but it has 15 electrons here and it has 15 electrons here, people. So then how do we exactly define trivalent and pentavalent? Well, there are various definitions to define them. Let me give you my definition. Okay. So tell me one thing. How many electrons does boron require to stabilize itself? How many? 5. 3 plus 5, it will give us 8. How many electrons does aluminum require to stabilize itself? Again, 5. Right? 3 plus 8, 5. How many electrons does gallium require to stabilize itself? 5 again. 13 plus 5 is 18, people. And how many electrons does indium require to stabilize itself? 5 again, people. 13 plus 5 is 18. Matlab, people, trivalent atoms are those atoms who require 5 electrons to stabilize themselves. 5 electrons to stabilize themselves. Is that clear? Trivalent atoms are those atoms which require 5 electrons to stabilize themselves. And likewise, please check the pentavalent atoms, everybody. Please check the pentavalent atoms. How many atoms does nitrogen require? 3. How many atoms does phosphorus require? 3. How many does arsenic require? 15 plus 3, which is 18. And again, antimony requires 3 people, because 15 plus 3, that is 18. So pentavalent atoms are those atoms which require how many people? 3 electrons to stabilize themselves. Is that clear now? Happy realization. Okay. So trivalent atoms, people, they require 5 electrons to stabilize themselves, and pentavalent atoms require 3 electrons to stabilize themselves. Please make a note of this much. Please let me know if you guys have any doubts. Shall we proceed? Let's continue. Next. So the next topic that I require for us to learn, people, they are called as flower diagrams. Flower diagrams. Okay. So let's talk about a silicon material, a silicon solid. Basically a solid, a material which is completely made up of silicon. It has infinite silicon atoms. So let us just consider one region where I can find 9 silicon atoms, people. I'm just drawing a silicon solid of 9 silicon atoms. It might have many atoms. I have drawn only 9 atoms so far. Let us focus on this silicon, people, this silicon. Please remember that silicon has electronic atomic number of 14, and hence its electronic configuration is how much, people? 2, 8, 4. So 4 is the number of electrons that it has in the outermost orbit, people. So let us say I will denote these 4 electrons by these petals. This is the first outermost electron. This is the second outermost electron. This is the third outermost electron, and this is the fourth outermost electron. Okay. And now let us draw the outermost electrons for the remaining silicon atoms, people. Let us draw the outermost silicon atoms, sorry, outermost electrons for the remaining silicon atoms. Now even this electron, people, will have 4, this silicon atom will have 4 electrons in the outermost shell, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Similarly, this silicon atom will have 4 electrons in the outermost shell, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And similarly, this silicon atom will have 4 electrons in the outermost shell, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And similarly, this silicon atom will have 4 electrons in the outermost shell, which is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Likewise, you can also draw the same for the edges, everybody. 1, 2, wait, I will use different color for the edges maybe. Let us say 1, 2, 3, 4, and likewise you can finish the rest. I don't want to focus on the edges. So basically this is everybody known as a flower diagram, because this thing looks like a flower, right? Which such that all the electrons, all the group of electrons are actually petals, people. All the group of electrons are petals. Okay. So I know that you have learned this in your 11th or 12th standard. You have learned this since your school, okay, college, 11th, 12th, whatever. Acha, by the way, I wanted to know, so in Mumbai, 11th and 12th standard is everybody college and not school. I'm not sure how it works back at your place. I think 11th and 12th standard is school and it's not really college. But here 11th and 12th is college, everybody. So yes, Pushpita said back at her place it's school, right? Anyway, so this is flower diagram for a normal silicon solid. Now let us draw a flower diagram for a silicon solid with an impurity. A silicon solid with, let us say, a trivalent impurity, with a trivalent impurity. So basically we can use anything from Baghi, people: boron, aluminum, gallium, indium. Usually we use aluminum because it is more abundantly available and it is cheap. So let us say we put one aluminum atom in between a complete silicon solid. Remember, I have mentioned here a trivalent impurity, people. One trivalent impurity. So let us say we have a trivalent impurity here, which is aluminum. Okay. And now it is surrounded by silicon solid, people. It is surrounded by silicon solid. So let us draw silicon solid. I'm not going to draw the edges this time, people. I don't require. I will just use 5 atoms. If you want, you can draw the edges, but I don't require the edges. Okay. So let us draw only these 4 silicon atoms, and we in the center we have aluminum atom. Okay. So aluminum, people, what is the electronic configuration for aluminum? What is the atomic number for aluminum? It is, people, 13. You can check, it is 13. So its electronic configuration is how much, people? 2, 8, 3. So basically it has 3 electrons in its outermost shell, people. So let us draw these 3 electrons, 1, 2, and 3. So basically aluminum creates bond with 3 silicon atoms, but it fails to create a bond with this silicon atom. It fails to create a bond with this silicon atom. Okay, because it has only 3 electrons in the outermost shell. Here we have a vacancy, people. To create bond with this silicon, we have a vacancy. We'll need an electron. We'll have to borrow an electron if at all we want to create a bond between this aluminum and this silicon. And now let us draw the petals for silicon, everybody. The atomic number for silicon, like we have learned, is 2, 8, 4, and 4 is the number of electrons in the valence shell. So now I can draw 1, 2, 3, 4. Similarly, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and similarly 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is the flower diagram for the silicon solid with trivalent impurity, people. Okay. Now, so people, this vacancy is something which we call as what? Hole in physics. That is something you have already learned, right? We call it hole. What will happen if I increase the temperature? Please remember that all these electrons in the outermost shell, they are weakly connected to the nucleus. They are weakly connected to the nucleus. So if at all you increase the temperature, people, these electrons can jump. For example, if I increase the temperature, then this electron from here, it can jump into this hole. It can fill this vacancy. It can jump into this hole. What will it do? It will leave behind a vacancy, people. It will leave behind a vacancy. This electron has jumped from here to here because you have just increased the temperature. Similarly, if you increase more temperature, people, what might just happen? An electron from here to here, an electron from here to here might just jump. It can fill this vacancy, but then it will leave behind a hole here. Similarly, an electron from here to here can jump. It can fill this vacancy and it will leave behind a hole here. An electron from here to here can jump. It can fill this vacancy, but it will leave a hole here. People, what do you observe? We observe that if the electrons are moving in this direction, then the holes, everybody, are moving in the opposite direction. The holes are moving in the opposite direction. Please remember that the direction of holes is opposite. It is anti-parallel to the direction of electrons, everybody. Electrons of hole are anti-parallel to the direction of electrons. So if we call electrons as negative, we will by default call holes as people positive. Okay, we'll call them as positive. So direction of holes is everybody opposite to that of electrons. Okay. So this is a school level revision, I know that, but don't worry, I am taking this to a particular point where we will learn something which is going to be more useful when it comes to IIT JAM people. All I know that, physicists tend to avoid this semiconductor chapter. So I'm not sure how much strong is your basics when it comes to this chapter. So I'm just taking my time to, introduce all of this to you all. Okay. By the way, so if at all suppose I have a battery, let us say I have a battery here. Yes, just hold on. Yes, positive terminal and negative terminal. So we all have learned that electrons, they are negative in nature. So electrons always tend to move towards positive terminal, correct? And holes, we just learned that since holes are positive and they move opposite to the direction of electrons, the holes will people move in this direction. This will be the direction of the holes and this will be the direction of the electrons. By the way, what is the direction of the current? Current. People, current is always directed from positive terminal to negative terminal. Current is always directed from positive terminal to negative terminal. So this is how the current will flow, people. This is how the current will flow from positive to negative. And hence remember, current is parallel to the direction of the holes, everybody. Current is parallel to the direction of the holes and it is anti-parallel to the direction of electrons. Okay. Current is parallel to the direction of the holes, everybody. And current is anti-parallel to the direction of electrons. Okay. Have you ever wondered why? Since childhood you have been learning that current goes from positive to negative, but you have also learned that the electrons go from negative to positive. So why are they in opposite direction, and why do we take current from positive to negative? Because technically, listen, technically people, when I say that mere ko current laga, like current is passing through my body, what does it mean? That basically electrons are flowing through my body. So technically electronic current and the flow of electrons in the direction of current, they should be parallel. Then why are they anti-parallel? Yes, it is just convention, but why? The question is why did they say that let us take the current in this direction and electrons in the opposite direction? Logically, if electrons are the things that are flowing, then current should be taken in the direction of the electrons, right? Why did they say that let us say current is moving in the opposite direction to that of electrons? I will tell you. People, initially it was believed that electrons are positive in nature. Initially it was believed that electrons are positive in nature, and hence they said that the electrons will flow from positive to negative, and hence the current will also flow from positive to negative. But after electrons, after a century later, we discovered protons, people. What is the most fascinating part about protons and electrons, everybody? They share the same charge. They have same charge, but they have different masses. They have different masses. And since proton is heavier, people, the science committee suggested that since proton is heavier, proton should get the right to be called as positive and electron should get the right to be called as negative. So it was only the logic that the proton is heavier. They said that from henceforth we'll say proton is positive and electron is negative. But then there was a confusion. We have already developed the theory and we have already developed all the electrostatic chapter considering that current flows from positive to negative direction. So then they said, okay, let it be that way. But henceforth, what we will do is we'll call proton as positive and electrons as negative. But the direction of current, we will take it from the direction of positive terminal to the negative terminal. Okay. Anyway, so that was just a little story about the same. So hence they said that this is the convention and hence we'll follow this convention. Let's continue. Forget. So that was our ghoda for the day. Let's come back to the tree. Next. So next topic that I require to learn, people. So we just learned a diagram for trivalent, right? We just learned a diagram for trivalent impurity. So basically trivalent impurity, people, has a hole. It always has a hole, people, when it comes to if at all you add trivalent impurity to a silicon solid. Okay, so now let us learn a diagram for silicon solid with a pentavalent impurity. Silicon solid with a pentavalent impurity. With a pentavalent impurity. So we have many pentavalent impurities: phosphorus, arsenic, antimony, and nitrogen. People, nitrogen is a gas, so obviously we cannot use that as an impurity. We will use phosphorus, people. And what is the electronic configuration for phosphorus? Its atomic number is 15. Its electronic configuration is 2,8,5. 2,8,5. So suppose we have a phosphorus material here. So people, it has 5 electrons in the outermost shell. So this is 1, then this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4. So what about the 5th? The 5th is not able to form a bond, people. 5th does not form a bond. 5th does not form a bond, everybody. So basically it is free. It is free. You can draw 5th electron randomly somewhere here, and you can say it is a free electron, people. It is a free electron. It does not form a bond with silicon. Okay, and then you can draw your silicon. You can draw 5 silicons here, and then eventually you can also draw their petals. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, if you want, you can finish the petals as well. It doesn't really matter. So the idea is, if at all we add a pentavalent impurity, a pentavalent atom with a silicon solid, then we will always get one free electron. Please remember, when we add one trivalent impurity, we will always get one free hole, and when we will add one pentavalent impurity, we will always get one free electron. So 2 pentavalent impurity, 2 free electron. 3 pentavalent impurity, 3 free electron. Okay. More the number of pentavalent impurities, people, more the number of free electrons that we will have from the beginning. Next is a topic which is called as energy level diagram and energy band diagram. Energy level diagram and energy band diagram. People, both are different. Okay, both are not the same. They are different things. Energy level diagram and energy band diagram. Both are different things, everybody. Okay. So I'm sure you all have learned that energy of any electron, energy of any atom is given by minus 13.6 upon n square into z square. You have learned this, right, in atom molecules and physics or some chapters. So this is the energy of any atom. And you say that energy in each shell, people, it is fixed. If at all I want to calculate energy in the first shell, energy in the K shell, people, then it will be minus 13.6 upon 1 square into z square. And if at all you want to calculate energy in the L shell, KLMN, we have KLMN, right? So all the shells. So if at all we want to calculate energy in the second shell, L shell, then it will be minus 13.6 upon 2 square into z square. Similarly, energy in the third shell, M shell, it will be minus 13.6 upon 3 square into z square. So by the way, what is Z? Z is your atomic number. Huh? Z is your atomic number, people. Z is your atomic number. So this is something you have already learned. So basically, you have been under an illusion that energy for each shell is fixed. You have been under an illusion, people. Yes, I want to declare this as illusion today. You have been always thinking that energy for each shell is fixed. You say that energy for each shell is quantized. Like every shell will have minus 13.6 into z square. For example, if at all I want to talk about hydrogen, people, Z for hydrogen is 1, right? Z for hydrogen is 1. Then you will always say that energy for K shell is simply minus 13.6. Energy for K shell, you think that it is minus 13.6 always, minus 13.6 electron volt. You have been under an illusion that energy for L will be minus 3.4 electron volts if you calculate minus 13.6 upon 2 square into 1. People, well, energies for each shell are fixed. Yes, it is correct. But only when you have an isolated atom and not group of atoms, people. This is true for only isolated atoms. Sorry. Fixed energy, people, fixed energy is true only for isolated atoms and not for group of atoms, everybody. What I mean is, suppose if I have one hydrogen, only one hydrogen, it is situated somewhere in one corner of the universe. then yes, energy for its K shell will be minus 13.6. Yes, energy for its L shell will be how much? Minus 3.4, and then you eventually will calculate all the shells. But if at all you suppose you bring many hydrogens together in a container, suppose we have a hydrogen gas, people. We have a hydrogen gas. So there are many hydrogen atoms here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are many hydrogen atoms here. People, haven't you ever wondered that this atom has, let's say this is a nucleus, it has a shell here, then there is another nucleus and it has a shell here. Haven't you ever wondered that this electron is negative, this electron is negative? Don't you think both will repel each other? Don't you think both will repel each other? They will, right? Basically, one hydrogen atom can affect the another hydrogen atom. The another hydrogen atom can affect the another hydrogen atom. This can affect this hydrogen atom. So do you think that all the energies of the shell will be constant? No, they cannot be constant, because their energies is being affected by the energies of the atoms which surround them, people, which surround them. Energies of their orbits are not constant, because if at all you bring all the elements in a group, then one atom can affect the another atom, people. Which will be the least affected? The one which will be at the surface. And which will be the most affected, people? The one which will be at the center. The one which will be at the center, it will be affected by all the hydrogen gases that it will have around it. And the one which will be at the surface, people, it will be least affected, because it will have only a couple of hydrogen atoms around it, and they will affect it less. So understand that one might have minus 13.6 electron volt, but somebody else might have minus 13.59 electron volt. Somebody might have minus 13.61 electron volt. People, their shells, their energy is not constant. Is that clear? Is that clear? Energy is constant only when a hydrogen atom is isolated, it is alone, it is lonely. But if at all you make it social, people, if at all you will tell the hydrogen to meet other hydrogen and to hang out with them, no, this is not going to be possible. Friends affect us, right? Friends affect us. I mean, influence us, not affect us. They can influence us. Okay. Clear? Great. So, and hence we have these two concept, people. One is energy level diagram, and another is what? Energy band diagram. So what is the difference between these two? It's now very much clear that energy level diagram is valid only for isolated atoms, people. Only for isolated atoms. But energy band diagram will come into picture when we will have people group of atoms. When we'll have group of atoms. Basically a solid. Okay. So suppose, let us take, suppose we have one silicon atom. Let us say we have one silicon atom isolated. Okay. We have one silicon isolated atom. So let us draw its energy level diagram, people. How does it look like? So silicon, people, has how many? 3 shells, 2, 8, 4. It has 14 as atomic number. Its electronic configuration is 2, 8, 4. It means that the first shell will have 2 electrons, and the second shell will have 8 electrons, and the third shell will have 4 electrons. So let us say that the energy of the first shell is around 1 electron volt. Let us say energy of the second shell, everybody. Okay, wait, hold on. Let me write it this way. This is energy of the first shell. Then there will be energy of the second shell, and then there will be energy of the third shell, or you can also call it as valence shell, people. Valence shell. Okay. This let us say this is 1 electron. Let us say this is 1.2 electron volt. Let us say this is 1.4 electron. I'm just using some random values. They are not correct values. I have just used some random values to explain you. So these are the energies of all these silicon atoms in first shell, second shell, and valence shell. First shell has, people, how many? 2 electrons. Second shell has how many, people? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 electrons. And valence shell has how many, people? 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. It has how many? 4 electrons. Okay. But now, listen. Instead of one silicon atom, if we have 2 or more silicon atom, a silicon solid, people, if we have a silicon solid, then do you think that all of them will have same first shell energy value? No. Do you think all of them will have same second shell energy value? No. Do you think all of them will have same valence shell energy value, people? No, their values will vary. Their values will vary because each and every silicon atom will affect each and every other silicon atom, people. So if at all I want to draw energy level diagram, now we will call it energy band diagram. And why the word band, people? Then I hope it's now clear that suppose that the first silicon atom has this much energy, but then there might be some silicon atom which might have this much energy in the first shell. There might be some silicon atom which might have this much energy in the first shell. People, all these energies are the energies of the first shell of different silicon atoms. One silicon atom might have, let us say, one electron volt, other might have 0.99 electron volt, other might have 0.98 electron volt. Basically, I can say that all the silicon atoms, they will have first shell energy, and it can be distributed in a band, people. It can be distributed in a band. Did you now get the idea what is a band energy, people? This, so henceforth we will call this as, people, first band energy. So first band energy is actually what, people? First band energy, it is nothing but it contains first band, people. First band, it basically contains energies of all the silicon atoms, energies of all the silicon atoms in their first shell, in their first shell. Is that clear, people? Is that clear? So basically this might be the lowest energy, which lowest first shell energy, and this might be the highest first shell energy of all the silicon atoms, everybody. So first band, people, it basically contains energies of all the silicon atoms in their first shell. Similarly, there will be second band energy, and similarly, people, there will be a valence band energy. Is that clear, everybody? Okay. So if at all you want to draw atoms, you can draw. Suppose if we have, let us say, group of atoms, let us say we have 3 silicon atoms, people, 3 silicon atoms in a group. So first silicon atom will have how many electrons in the first shell? 2. Second will also have 2. Third will also have 2. So first band has 6 electrons. First band has 6 electrons. Second band will have how much, people? 8 plus 8 plus 8, it will have 24 electrons. And valence band will have how many electrons, people? 4 plus 4 plus 4, 12 electrons, everybody. So I hope, so the definition of valence band is pretty much clear. Okay. So what is a valence band, basically, everybody? Valence band actually contains energies of all the valence shells of all the silicon atoms, people. If at all we are talking about silicon atoms, valence band will be basically the valence energy of all the silicon atoms contained in a group. It is cluster of all the valence energies. In simple language, it is cluster of all the valence energies. Okay. Acha, listen. Henceforth, in the chapter, we will never draw first shell and second shell. We will never draw first shell and second shell. We will always talk about valence shell, people. Henceforth, all that I will draw is directly valence shell. We will not talk about first shell, second shell, first band, second band. Okay. So let us just redraw energy level diagram and energy band diagram. But now I will draw only valence shell, people. This is valence shell and this is valence band, everybody. This is valence band and this is valence shell. Energy and energy. Okay. So I think this much is very much clear to you all, that all the atoms in a solid will have different energies. They won't have same energies. So tell me one thing. If you increase the temperature, electrons will be emitted from the valence band. Electrons will be emitted from the valence shell and they will become free. But people, when they become free, even after becoming free, they have some energy, right? Free energy, the kinetic energy with which it will be with which it will be moving around. Correct? It will have some free energy. Do you think? Listen to my question carefully. Suppose I have, let's say, 3 silicon atoms, people. Suppose I have, better. So suppose people, we have 3 silicon atoms. The first silicon atom, let us say that it has energy of 1.2 electron volt in the valence shell. Let us say the second silicon atom, it has 1.19 electron volt, and let us say the third has, let's say, 1.21 electron volt in the valence shell. People, what will happen if I provide them energy of 1.5 electron volt provided energy? What will happen? These electrons will jump out of the valence shell and they will become free. After becoming free, how much energy will all of them will possess, people? This will possess an energy of 0.3 electron after becoming free. This will possess an energy of 0.31 electron volt after becoming free, and this will possess an energy of 0.29 electron after becoming free. What do you see, people? That the free energy, that the conduction energy of each and every electron after becoming free as well, it is different, people. It is different. So suppose if I have an electron here, and if at all you increase the temperature, people, then this electron will become free. This electron will become free, but even after becoming free, it will have some energy, right? Even after becoming free, it will have some energy, and this is the conduction energy, people. This is the conduction energy. This is the conduction energy. But when it comes to group of atoms, people, the conduction energies will be different. So again, we won't have a conduction energy, we won't have a conduction level, we will have a conduction band. Because even after becoming free, one electron can have energy this much, another electron can have energy this much, another electron can have energy this much. They can have different energy even after becoming free. So conduction band, basically, people, conduction band, it is nothing but cluster of, conduction band is nothing but cluster of energies of free electrons, of free electrons. Is that clear? Conduction band, everybody, it is nothing but what? Cluster of energies of free electrons. Next, free electrons. So now let us learn conductors, insulators, and semiconductors in detail. Conductors, insulators, and semiconductors. Okay. So basically, when you say conductors, people, it has free electrons. It has free electrons already. Free electrons are present already. When you say insulators, people, they have no free electron. They have no free electron. All the electrons are bounded. All electrons are bounded. Okay. So let us draw the energy level diagram for these two people. Here we go. So energy level diagram for conductors and energy level diagram for insulators. Okay. Here we go. So let us say conductors, people, we will always draw valence band and conduction band. So this is, people, valence band, and this is, everybody, what? Conduction band. This is valence band and this is conduction band. Okay. Now, so conductors, people, already have free electrons. So there will be electrons in the conduction band already, because conduction band basically is nothing but the energy of all the free electrons, right? So there will be free electrons present in the conduction band already. But what about valence band? Obviously, there will be electrons in the valence shell as well, people. Who said that they won't have any valence electrons? There will be electrons in the valence shell, but there will also be electrons which are already free in the conductor, people, which are already free in the conductor. Okay. So there will be some electrons in the valence band, there will be some electrons in the conduction band. Okay. So you can say it is partially filled. We have partially filled valence band, and we will have partially filled conduction band. Partially filled conduction band. Okay, because there will be electrons which will be already free in conductors, and hence we will have some conduction energy as well. Acha, I forgot to define energy band gap, by the way. Let us define that here. There was a definition which I was supposed to take. Energy band gap. Energy band gap. It is also known as forbidden energy. It is also known as forbidden energy. Okay. So basically, this gap between the conduction band and the valence band, this gap everybody is known as band gap energy Eg. And if at all you want to define it in English, then how will we say? People, please never define it as the difference between conduction band and valence band. No, listen to me. You cannot define it as the difference between conduction band and valence band. Why, sir? Because conduction band is a region, people, and valence band is also region. So if at all you are saying it is a difference between conduction band and valence band, from which point of conduction to which point of valence, that is the question then. Like this conduction point, this conduction point, this conduction, which conduction? This valence, this valence, this valence, which valence, people? So you cannot just say it is a difference between conduction and valence. You will have to be specific. You will have to say that the difference between the bottom of the conduction band, the difference between the bottom of the conduction band and the top of the valence band, people. The difference between the bottom of the conduction band and the top of the valence band, this is band gap energy or forbidden energy. The difference between the bottom of the conduction band and the top of the valence band, this is everybody band gap energy, also called as forbidden energy. Let me first, instead of making you ratify things, let us understand what does band gap energy mean, people. Sir, what is this band gap energy? It simply means that electrons cannot ever in their life have this much energy. No, they cannot ever in their life have this much energy. This energy is forbidden for them. Now, what does that mean, people? So, suno dhyan se, listen to me carefully. Keep your pens down and listen. It's a concept which might be a bit enlightening to you all. So, suppose an electron has an energy of, let's say, 1 electron volt in the valence shell. It has energy of 1 electron volt in the valence shell. What if I provided 1.1 electron volt? Do you think it will become free? Technically, it should. Technically, it should, because it has only 1 electron volt in the valence shell. I am providing it 1.1. I am providing a greater energy, right? So I am providing greater energy by how much? 0.1 electron volt. So it should become free. And after becoming free, how much energy should it possess? It should possess an energy of 0.1 electron volt, the remaining 0.1 electron volt. But we find that no, if we provide 1.1 electron volt energy, electron does not become free. Even though to become free, it requires only 1 electron volt, it says, no, I'm not going to come out even if you provide me 1.1. Even if you provide 1.2, it will say, no, I'm not going to come out. Even if you provide 1.3, it will say, no, I'm not going to come out. But as soon as you provide 1.4, it will come out. There are these energies, people, from 1 electron volt to 1.4 electron volt, let us say, which are forbidden for the electrons to have. They cannot have that many energy. Now the question is why? It's logical. Suppose we are in a classroom. I am teaching you in a classroom. And I'm teaching you a very boring concept in a very boring manner. And you feel like leaving out of the class. Okay. So you decide, okay, sir, let me just leave after the class immediately. But as soon as you move out of the class, what will happen, people? I mean, to move after the class, you will require some velocity, right? Otherwise, I will catch you that, okay, I will see you that, yes, you have just left out. So you require some energy. So suppose you move out with speed of light, something like that. You just go out and I'm not able to see whether you have went out or not. But suppose if you have that much velocity, which is required to move out of the class, but it is not sufficient to move out of the whole office, because there is an office outside. What if the office guy catches you? You were successful enough to move out of the class, people. But what if the office guy catches you? So you should have a velocity at least which should be also greater than the office velocity, not only my velocity, not only our classroom's velocity, right? The idea is, if at all we have an electron, people, which is in the valence shell, yes, you will give it certain energy. But what after coming out of the class, what after coming out of that electron, what after becoming free, some another atom captures it. Or all your effort, people, went in vain. So basically, there is this minimum energy that is required, that after becoming free, you should have this much energy so that even all the other atoms, they are not able to catch you. Because remember, they will have holes, they will have vacancies. And if at all they will have vacancies, basically it will be positively charged, and the electrons are negatively charged, people. So if at all you have very less energy, even after becoming free, then another atoms might just capture you, people. And hence these are the energies which are forbidden. Basically, electron just cannot become free even after you provide it some energy beyond a certain limit. I don't know if at all the example that I gave was good or bad. Anyway, so basically I just hope that you understood. Okay, so let's continue. So that is, people, band gap energy. That is band gap energy. So let's continue from here. Where was I? Let me erase this much. So this much energy is forbidden for electrons. That is what we have learned. Okay. Now, what about insulators? Achha, wait, hold on. By the way, if at all we will increase temperature, what will happen? Electrons from the valence shell will become free, and they will become free. Basically, they will go to the conduction band. They will go to the conduction band, but they will leave behind a hole, people. If you increase more temperature, even again, then again this electron will jump. It will become free. It will move to the conduction band. It will become free, but again it will leave behind a vacancy, people. It will leave behind a vacancy. Okay, so whenever an electron jumps from valence band to conduction band, it leaves behind a hole in the valence band, people. It leaves behind a hole in the valence band. Okay, so now let us draw the same for insulators. What did we just learn, people? That insulators have no free electrons. Insulators have no free electrons. Basically, what does it mean? That the conduction band will be, people, completely empty. There will be no free electrons. It will be completely empty. And valence band, there will be electrons in the valence band, but it will be bounded. All the valence band electrons, people, they will be bounded, and it will have no free electrons. It simply means that conduction band is completely empty. Is that clear? Completely empty. Okay. Next, what about semiconductors? People, even in semiconductors, the story is same. Even in semiconductors, the story is same. It will have a valence band, and electrons will be there in the valence band. Let us say silicon, it will have valence band, but there won't be free energy. There won't be electrons in the conduction band. There won't be electrons in the conduction band. There will be no free electrons in the conduction band here. Conduction band will be also completely empty. Now the question is, then sir, what is the difference between these two? Any guesses? People, what are insulators? Insulators do not conduct electricity. Even if you increase the temperature, they will never ever conduct electricity in their life, everybody. They will never ever conduct electricity in their life. Achha, just hold on now. Yes, they will never ever conduct electricity, people, in their life. And why does it so? Sir, I'm increasing the temperature. Then don't you think valence band electrons should jump to the conduction band, people? They should, right? But actually they cannot, because this conduction band, everybody, it is very, very, very much away from the valence band. If at all I want to draw the actual diagram of this, then it will look something like, if this is the energy, people, if this is the energy, then the conduction band will be very much away from the valence band. You will require technically infinite sort of energy to ensure that, you know, electrons will jump from valence band to conduction band. This band gap, people, this band gap is very large. Eg is very large. It is on an average from 3 electron volt to 15 electron volt, people. Band gap energy for electrons, it is around 3 electron volts to 15 electrons, which is a very huge value, everybody. But in case of semiconductors, band gap energy is very small. Okay, not very small, but you can say small. It is small. It is from 1 electron volt to 3 electron volt. Usually from 2 electron volt to 3 electron volt, people. From 2 electron volt to 3 electron volt. Band gap energy is very small, 2 electron volt to 3 electron volt. Okay. Do you remember how did I start the class today? I asked you a question that what exactly are semiconductors? And what did I define, people? That in general, semiconductors can be controlled. You can control the current in a semiconductor. I hope you realize now, because if you increase the temperature, electrons will jump from valence shell to conduction band, people. It's simple. If we can control the temperature, right? We have the power to control the temperature. Thanks to the technology, we have the power to control the temperature, and hence we have the power to decide that how many electrons do we want in the conduction band. Because the amount of temperature that we will increase, only that many amount of electrons will become free from the valence band to the conduction band, and they will leave behind a hole in the valence band. Is that clear, people? Because the band gap is small, you increase the temperature, the electrons will jump from valence band to conduction band, and hence you are able to control them, people. You are able to control them because you can control the temperature. Since you can control the temperature, you can control the electrons in the conduction band. You can decide how many electrons do you want in the conduction band. Is that clear, everybody? Is that clear? So I hope the distinguish between conductors, insulators, and semiconductors is very much clear. That in case of conductors, conduction band is completely filled and valence band is also filled, and conduction and valence band both are filled. Insulators and semiconductors, people, they both have empty conduction band, just that the band gap of semiconductors is less and the band gap of insulators is high. That is the difference between these two, people. The band gap of semiconductors is less and the band gap of insulators is high. So basically, room temperature is sufficient to ensure that electrons jump from valence band to conduction band when it comes to semiconductors, people. If you want, you can make a note of this line as well. You can note this line that room temperature is sufficient. Room temperature is sufficient to ensure to release electrons from valence band to conduction band in semiconductors, but not in insulators. Is that clear, people? But not in insulators. Achu, we just said, right? You yourself gave the answer that if you increase the temperature, the electrons in the conduction band increases, right? Electrons in the conduction band increase. It means that electrons have become free. So basically, conductivity has increased. It means that resistance has decreased, and hence resistance and temperature are inverse. Clear? And hence resistance and temperature are inverse. Okay. Achha, by the way, what is the band gap energy of conductors? It is usually less than 1 electron volt, people. For conductors, it is less than 1 electron volt. At times, by the way, the conduction band and valence band might even overlap. Conduction band and valence band, they might also overlap, everybody. Conduction band and valence band, they might also overlap at times. Sir, what does this mean, overlapping? Let us understand what does this overlapping mean, people. It simply means that this much energy, sorry, just hold on. Yes, it simply means that this much energy is shared by conduction electrons as well as valence electrons. Basically, I can say that suppose this energy is how much, let us say 1.5 electron volt. It simply means that at 1.5 electron volts, we can find some electrons in conductors which have become free, and we can also find some electrons in conductors which have not become free. Basically, the electrons that will become free will be obviously on the surface, and the electrons which have not become free, they will be obviously at the center. We know, right? Electrons at the center, you will require more energy to release them, but electrons at the surface, they can be released at a very less temperature as well. So same energy can be shared by conduction band as well as valence band when it comes to conductors. So overlapping is also a case which is possible in case of conductors, everybody. Is that clear? Any doubts until here, people? Next. So now let us learn, people, types of semiconductors. Types of semiconductors. We have two types of semiconductors, people. One is intrinsic, other is extrinsic. Intrinsic semiconductors basically means that they are pure, and extrinsic basically means they are impure. When we say impure, basically impurity is added to intrinsic. Impurity is added to intrinsic. And which kind of impurities do we add? Usually of two types: trivalent impurity and then pentavalent impurity. So when we add a pentavalent impurity to intrinsic semiconductor, to pure semiconductor, then they become extrinsic semiconductor. Then the new kind of semiconductor, people, you have learned that you call it N-type semiconductor, and in case of trivalent, you call them, people, P-type semiconductor. Correct? N-type and P-type. Okay. And people, the process of adding impurity to intrinsic semiconductor so that it becomes extrinsic semiconductor, it is called as doping. It is called as doping. And the impurity atoms, that is trivalent atoms and pentavalent atoms, they are called as dopants. They are called as dopants. Okay. Okay. So now let us learn about them in more detail. So let us first learn N-type semiconductors, everybody. N-type semiconductors. Or wait, I think we should first learn intrinsic. Let us first learn intrinsic semiconductors, pure. Basically, it has only silicon atoms. Suppose it has only silicon atoms. It has only silicon atoms. Okay. So let us draw its energy band diagram. It will have a valence band, and then it will have a conduction band. Initially, there are electrons only in the valence band, people. Okay. Suppose we have two atoms, then it will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 electrons in the valence band. Two silicon atoms, 8 electrons in the valence band. 4 plus 4. What will happen if you increase the temperature, everybody? The electrons from the valence band will jump to the conduction band, and it will leave behind a hole. If you increase more temperature, then electrons from the valence band will jump to the conduction band, and it will leave behind a hole. Again, this will jump to the conduction band, and it will leave behind a hole. What do you see, everybody? How many electrons are there in the conduction band? 3. How many holes are there in the valence band? 3. So one thing that we observe is number of electrons in conduction band, it is equal to number of holes in valence band. This is only possible in case of intrinsic semiconductor. Ne is equal to Nh. Number of electrons in conduction band is equal to number of holes in valence band. People, please remember that Ne is not number of electrons. No. Ne is number of electrons in conduction band. There is a difference. Well, how many electrons are there in this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm not talking about all the electrons, people. I am talking about number of electrons in the conduction band. Ne is number of electrons in the conduction band. It is not the total number of electrons, everybody. Please don't be confused in this. It is not the total number of electrons. It is number of electrons in the conduction band. And Nh, it is number of holes in the valence band. So in case of intrinsic semiconductors, people, Ne and Nh both are equal. Both are equal. Okay. Next, Now let's talk about extrinsic people. Extrinsic. So let us talk about n-type semiconductors, that is pentavalent impurity. Pentavalent impurity. So if you can check the flower diagram of pentavalent impurity n-type semiconductor people, then you will see that we had phosphorus in the center, and then you had silicons outside. Sorry, and then you had silicons outside. And if you see, you have already drawn a free electron there. You have said that uh, n-type semiconductor or a pentavalent impurity semiconductor, it contains one free electron already with itself. It contains one free electrons already with itself, right? So basically, if I want to draw energy band diagram of the scene, so there will be a valence band. There will be a valence band. So let us say valence band will have all the electrons in the valence shell of all the atoms. And what about conduction band people? What do you think? Will it be empty initially? No, it will not. People, you have added an impurity. And which impurity is this? Pentavalent impurity. We have already learned that one pentavalent impurity gives us one free electron. So there will be one free electron present already in the conduction band. There will be one free electron present already in the conduction band. And if at all we have two pentavalent impurities, people, if at all we have two pentavalent impurities, then we will have two free electrons already in the conduction band. Is that clear, people? Is that clear? Okay, so there will be some number of electrons already present in the conduction band. Okay, now let us increase the temperature. What will happen? The electrons from the valence band will jump to the conduction band and it will leave behind a hole. Electrons from the valence band will jump to the valence band and it will leave behind a hole. But what do you see now, people? What do you think? Are Ne and NH equal? What do you think? Number of electrons in the conduction band, number of electron holes in the valence band. What is it? As we observe the number of electrons in the conduction band, how many are there? There are 5 electrons in the conduction band, and there are how many holes in the valence band, people? There are 3 holes in the valence band. So I can say in n-type semiconductors, people, number of electrons are greater than number of holes. Number of electrons in the conduction band, they will always be greater than number of holes in the valence band. And why is it so? Number of electrons in the conduction band will always be greater than number of holes in the valence band. And why is it so, people? Because the one pentavalent impurity, it will give us one free electron, and as many pentavalent impurity we will add, we will get as many extra free electron, people. These are extra free electrons. These are extra free electrons. Okay? They are not generated by the breaking of the covalent bonds. They were present just at the beginning. They are not. They're extra. Yes, in simple language, they are just extra. Okay, we are not making them by breaking the covalent bonds. We are just making them by adding impurities. Is that clear? And this is the reason, people, tell me one thing: electrons are greater than hole. Then what do you think? Electrons are negative, right? And holes are positive. And hence, since electrons are greater than hole, this type of semiconductor is everybody called as n-type semiconductor. Is that clear? Why do we call them n-type semiconductor, people? Because when we add a pentavalent impurity, electrons are greater than hole. Basically, we have got more negative and then more positive. Okay. Clear? Similarly, can we now draw the same for p-type semiconductors, people? Let us draw. What will happen to p-type? P-type semiconductor. So let us draw the energy level diagram. We have a conduction band here, and we have a valence band here, and we have a conduction band here. So there will be electrons in the valence band in the beginning. Okay. Now, people, what happens in p-type? What is it that we have learned? Basically, we have a trivalent impurity, people. Trivalent, something like aluminum. So we have seen that aluminum, it already has a hole. It already has a hole, people. So there will be a hole present initially at the valence band. There will be a hole present initially at the valence band because of the um, travalent impurity. This is a vacancy, people. This is a vacancy because aluminum has how many? 2, 8, 3. It has only 3 electrons in the valence shell. It forms 3 bonds, but the fourth bond it is not being able to be formed, people. You will have one vacancy in the valence band at the beginning. But what will happen if we have 2 aluminum atoms, people? 2 aluminum atoms. Then we will have 2 holes in the valence band initially. If we have 3 aluminum atoms, then we will have 3 holes in the valence band initially. So as many number of trivalent atoms we will have, that many number of holes we will have in the valence band, people. Please remember, holes are always present in the valence band. Holes cannot be in the conduction band. Holes are not free, people. Holes are not free. Holes are not free. Holes are always present in the valence band. Only when electrons jumps out, it leaves behind a hole, people. Holes are not free. They are always present in the valence shell. Okay, they are always present in the valence shell. So now, what is the next step, people? What we will do? We'll increase the temperature. So electrons from the valence band, it will jump to the conduction band. Electrons from the valence band, it will jump to the conduction band. Electrons from the valence band, it will jump to the conduction band. But now what do you see? We see that number of electrons in the conduction band are only 3, but the number of holes in the valence band are how many? 6. So always the number of electrons will be less than the number of holes. The number of electrons in the conduction band, they will always be less than the number of holes in the valence band. Is that clear, everybody? Number of electrons in the conduction band, they will always be less than the number of holes in the valence band. Always. Okay. Enough of theory for the day, and now let us jump to the numerical part that is important for our IIT JAM people. So I wanted to teach this much to you all, and I'm so happy. I'm so happy and so glad that basically there were no doubts from your end. So I'm happy to realize that part. Okay. So people, there is something which is called as law of mass action. Law of mass action. So people, in intrinsic semiconductor, we have learned that Ne and Nh are greater. In p-type semiconductor, we have learned that number of holes are greater than number of electrons. Achha, by the way, since holes are greater than electrons, holes are positive, electrons are negative. Since it is more positive, you call it p-type, huh? And hence you call it p-type. It's obvious now. Since holes are more positive, you call them p-type semiconductor, which is trivalent impurities, people. P-type matlab trivalent impurities. Okay. And in n-type semiconductor, we have learned that Ne is greater than Nh. And these are people pentavalent impurities. These are pentavalent impurities. Okay, let me just write it in this manner. Hold on. Eraser. Let me write Ne on LHS and Nh on RHS. Ne is less than Nh. Ne on LHS and Nh on RHS for some reason. Okay. Next. Henceforth, since Ne and Nh are equal, we will call them Ni, people. This is called as intrinsic concentration. Intrinsic concentration. Intrinsic concentration. Okay. Now, listen to this carefully, people. Law of mass action tells us that no matter you have intrinsic or p-type or n-type, for all of them, the product of Ne and Nh is always constant. The product of Ne and Nh is always constant, and it is always equal to Ni square. And it is always equal to Ni square. Ne and Nh, the product of Ne and Nh is people constant, and it is always equal to people Ni square. If at all you are thinking, sir, how is this possible? Sir, यहाँ पर Ne and Nh are equal. Yes, it is logical that Ne into Nh, it can be written as Ni into Ni, and it will be Ni square. Yes, sir, it is logical and intrinsic. But how can you say that in case of p-type, in case of n-type, it is equal to Ni square? Because here, sir, Nh is greater than Ne, and Ne is greater than Nh. How can you say that? Let me first tell you one thing, that even though intrinsic has Ne and Nh both are equal, p-type has Ne less than Nh, n-type has Ne greater than Nh, it does not mean that this is neutral, or it does not mean that this is positive, or it does not mean that this is negative, people. No, you cannot say that this is more neutral, this is more positive, this is more negative. No, people, you all have learned that atom as a whole is electrically neutral. Number of electrons are always equal to number of holes. All of them, people, all of them are electrically neutral. All of them are electrically neutral, all of them. Number of electrons and number of protons, both are always equal, people. All of them are electrically neutral. Okay, we are not saying that this has more positive charge and this has more negative charge. No, we are only saying that the current in this case is more due to the positive carrier, and the current in this case is more due to the negative carrier. And in this case, the current is equal due to the positive as well as negative carrier. But I am not saying that this is positively charged and negatively charged. No, people, they are actually electrically neutral. Okay. However, to explain this, I can, explain this to you analytically. Tell me one thing. What is 8 into 8? Or wait, what is 8 into 8, people? 64? Correct? Okay. What is 32 into 2? 64. What is 2 into 32? 64. Sir, it's quite obvious. Why are you teaching us this? Well, this is what is happening here, people. This is Ne and this is NH. When number of electrons and number of holes are equal, the product is constant. When the number of electrons are greater than the number of holes, the product is constant. When the number of electrons are less than the number of holes, the product is constant, people. And this product is what? Square of 8, people. Ni square. Is that clear? So shall we now do a numerical finally after long ages? Okay, let's do that. Let's take a question now. Here we go. Acha, by the way, Ne, the actual definition of this is number of electrons per unit volume. Okay, number of electrons per unit volume. Number of electrons in conduction band. In conduction band per unit volume. So if you want, you can write this Ne upon V. And similarly, NH, everybody, it is a number of holes in valence band per unit volume. Okay, per unit volume. So if you can write this number of holes per unit volume. So the SI unit of this, people, number of electrons does not have a SI unit, but volume has an SI unit of meter cube. So you can write this meter minus 3. Similarly, the SI unit of this will be also number of holes does not have an SI unit. This is upon meter cube. This can be written as meter minus 3. Okay. Let's take this question. A pure silicon at 300 Kelvin has electron and hole concentration this much each. So what do we read? Pure silicon, it simply means intrinsic. Pure word is important. It means that it is intrinsic, which means that number of electrons and number of holes are equal, people, and they are equal to Ni. Number of electrons and number of holes are equal, and they're equal to Ni. And they have given the number of electrons and number of holes are how much? It is 1.5 into 10 raised to minus 6 per unit volume, which is meter minus 3 per unit volume. Okay. Now, doping of indium increases the carrier. See, I have put here a question for your purposely. People, can you tell me, if you dope by indium, doping by indium, then which carrier will increase? First, answer me this. If you dope intrinsic semiconductor, I have a pure semiconductor, people. I have a pure semiconductor. You have added indium in this, so it becomes extrinsic, people. Then which carrier will increase, people? Will hole increase or electron will increase? Which carrier will increase? People, indium comes under Bagi. Boron, aluminum, gallium, indium. Indium comes under Bagi. And Bagi, I have told you, it comes under trivalent, people. Trivalent basically means p-type. And p-type basically means holes. So remember that holes will increase, people. Holes will increase. Okay, holes will increase. So yes, Abhishek, very good. So holes will increase. So doping of indium increases a carrier to 4.5 into 10 raised to 22. So which carrier is this, people? This is which carrier? It is holes, everybody. So they have given that when we go to extrinsic, number of holes is given to us. It is how much? 4.5 into 10 raised to 22. Is that clear, people? Is that clear? 4.5 into 10 raised to 22 meter minus 3. Is that clear? Sure. Okay. Did you understand how did I understood whether this is holes or electrons? Because they have used this word indium people. And hence the examples, the code that I gave you is important. Indium comes under trivalent, trivalent comes under p-type, p times means holes people. So it will increase holes. So holes are how many? 4.5 into 10 raised to 22. Calculate the concentration of the other carrier. Ne you have to calculate. Solve it. Na into nh is ni square. Solve this. Ne into nh is ni square. Please solve. So Pushpita has given me an answer. So 0.5 into 10 raised to 10. I think so it is correct. So let's just check. Okay. So Ne into nh is ni square. In E, we have to find nh is 4.5 into 10 raised to 22. Ni square, Ni is 1.5 into 10 raised to 16 square. So 1.5 square is 2.25. 10 raised to 16 into 2 is 10 raised to 32. This is Ne, and you can put this in the denominator. It is 4.5 into 10 raised to 22. Yes, Pushpita, you are correct. So 2.25 upon 4.5 people, 2.25 upon 4.5, this is 2. So this is half into 10 raised to 32 minus 10 raised to 22, which is 10. So this is 0.5 into 10 raised to 10 meter minus 3. Okay. The question is, great. A pure silicon crystal has these many atoms per meter cube. Okay. It is doped by 1 ppm concentration of antimony. Calculate the number of electrons and holes. Now listen, it's a challenging question to be honest. First of all, you should know the meaning of ppm people. ppm means that parts per million. Parts per million. So when I say 1 ppm of X, it simply means that it is 1 upon million. 1 upon million times X. Million means mega people. Mega matlab 10 raised to 6. 1 upon 10 raised to 6 times X. So they have said that it is doped by 1 ppm concentration of antimony. So they have said the number of antimony atoms, it is 1 parts per million of number of silicon atoms. People, it's a huge number. It means that after 1 million silicon, you are adding just 1 antimony. After 2 million silicon, you are adding 2 antimony. After 3 million silicon, you are adding 3 antimony. Okay. So one number of antimony atoms, it is 1 part per million of number of silicon atoms. So it is 1 upon 10 raised to 6. What are number of silicon atoms, people? What are number of silicon atoms they have given, right? Number of silicon atoms are how much? How much? A pure silicon crystal has 4 into 10 raised to 28 atoms. These are the number of silicon atoms, people. 4 into 10 raised to 28. So this is 4 into 10 raised to 28 upon 10 raised to 6. This is 10 raised to 22. 28 minus 6. So these are the number of antimony atoms, people. Number of antimony atoms are 4 into 10 raised to 22. Okay. Now, people, antimony comes under N-type or P-type? It comes under P-type. PAN, phosphorus, arsenic, antimony, nitrogen. Phosphorus, arsenic, antimony, nitrogen. PAN. I remember it like this. It comes under N-type. Sorry, what I'm saying. It is N-type. It is N-type. Phosphorus, arsenic, antimony, nitrogen. Okay. So basically, N-type means what, people? I've already told you that one N-type impurity donates 1 free electron. Correct? Donates 1 free electron. Achha, by the way, this is the reason you can also write. This is the reason that N-type are also called as donor impurities. Okay, N-type are also called as donor impurities because they donate one free electron. Okay, one N-type impurity, they have 5 electrons, right? They have 5 electrons, so they donate 1 electron because the 5th electron is not able to form a bond, people. So it donates 1 electron. So please, if you want, you can make a note that N-type are also called as donor impurities, and similarly, people, P-type are called as acceptor impurities. P-type. People, P-type are called as acceptor impurities because they have a hole, right, and they can accept an electron. They have one P-type impurity that provides us 1 vacancy. It means that it can accept 1 electron. Okay, so P-type are also called as acceptor impurities. Okay, so one time N-type impurity, people, it will donate 1 free electron. How many N-type impurities do we have here? How many number of antimony atoms do we have here? 4 into 10 raised to 22, everybody. How many number of N-type impurities do we have here? 4 into 10 raised to 22. So how many number of free electrons do we have, people? 4 into 10 raised to 22, because one n-time impurity will donate one free electron, which means that one antimony atom will donate one free electron, two antimony atom will donate two free electron, and 4 into 10 raised to 22 antimony atoms, it will donate 4 into 10 raised to 22 free electrons. Is that clear, people? So number of electrons in the conduction band, the free electrons, they are how much, people? It is 4 into 10 raised to 22. Is that clear, people? Is that clear? Number of electrons is 4 into 10 raised to 22. So bus, we are done. We have already calculated the number of electrons. Now you have to calculate the number of holes. Ni is given to you all. Start the business, please. Please calculate NH. So Ne into NH, it is Ni square. So NH is Ni square upon Ne, which is Ni, which is how much? 4 into 10. Sorry, Ni is given to us. Sorry. Ni is how much? 1.2 into 10 raised to 16 square upon Ne, which is 4 into 10 raised to 22. So 1.2 ka square, people, it is 1.44. 12 ka square is 144. 1.22 ka square will be 1.44. 16 into 2 is 32 upon 4 into 10 raised to 32, everybody. So 1.44 upon 4, this is 0.36 into 10 raised to 10, people. This is 22, sorry, okay. 0.36 into 10 raised to 10. That's your answer, meter minus 3. Clear, people? Great. So let us now take a concept which is of important. I know that it's already 5:54, but I have already created the assignment for you all, right? And I have to teach you this concept before giving you the assignment. So the concept, everybody, is known as conductivity. Conductivity. Okay. So people, the total conductivity of a semiconductor, it is given by conductivity of electrons plus conductivity of holes. Conductivity of electrons plus conductivity of holes. Okay, first you can just make a note of this much. Conductivity of electrons plus conductivity of holes. Now, people, it is obvious that more the number of electrons, more will be the conductivity, and less the number of electrons, less will be the conductivity. So conductivity is directly proportional to the number of electrons and number of holes, everybody. Okay. Also, more the charge, faster, more will be the conductivity, and less the charge, less will be the conductivity. Because we all know that I is Q by T, right? If charge is more than the current, will be more, people. Charge is more than current, will be more. Conductivity will be greater, people. So conductivity is also directly proportional to charge. So if we combine them, then sigma is directly proportional to N. It is also directly proportional to Q. It is directly proportional to both of them, people. It is directly proportional to both of them. If we remove the proportionality, then we will get a constant. We'll denote that constant by mu, people. We will denote that constant by mu. And mu is, everybody, known as mobility. Mu is known as mobility. Okay. Now the question is, sir, why do we denote it by mu? People, A in English is alpha in Greek. B in English is beta in Greek. D in English is delta in Greek. Similarly, M in English is mu in Greek. M stands for mobility, and hence mu stands for mobility, people. Mu stands for mobility. Okay. So this is the reason we denote it by mu here. Okay. So sigma is, people, mu into N into Q. Okay. So here, Acha, by the way, it has been assumed that the charge of hole is equal and opposite to the charge of electron, people. Okay. So the sigma total, you can also write this as, what is, can I now write sigma ES? Listen, what is sigma mu and Q? So can I write sigma ES mu E into Ne into E? Charge of electron, and sigma conductivity of hole, people. That will be mobility of hole into number of holes, mobility of hole into number of holes, into charge of hole will be, people, equal and opposite to the charge of electron. It will be E again. It will be E again. Okay, it will be E again. Charge of electron and hole are same, people. Okay, charge of electron and charge of hole, they are same, people. It is E. Okay. Any doubts? Any doubts? So what will sigma total become, people? It will be simply mu E Ne E plus mu H NH E. if you want, you can take E common. This will be mu E into Ne plus mu H into NH. This is sigma total, people. Okay. So people, sigma is 1 upon resistivity. This is conductivity, right? This is conductivity. And this is resistivity, people. This is resistivity. Resistivity. Again, if you have not wondered, people, why do we denote resistivity by rho, everybody? Because R in English is rho in Greek, people. And resistivity is R. In Greek, it is resistivity, people. Rho. R in English is rho in Greek. Okay, aperialization. Anyway, so what is the SI unit of resistivity, everybody? Resistivity SI unit is how much? Ohm meter, right? Resistivity is ohm meter. So what is conductivity, people? Ohm inverse meter inverse. Conductivity is ohm inverse meter inverse. Or if you want, you can also write this ohm meter inverse. You can also write this ohm inverse can be written as Simon, people. Simon meter inverse. Simon meter inverse. Okay. Achha, by the way, I have just a fundamental question to you all again. Have you ever wondered? Achha, listen. How do we denote joule? We denote joule by J. How do we denote ampere? By A. How do we denote Newton? By N. Joule is SI unit for energy, ampere is SI unit for current, Newton is SI unit for force. Similarly, how do we denote Coulomb? By C. It is SI unit for charge. How do we denote ohm, people? Resistance. This question is, why don't we denote it by O? कभी सोचा है? We denote this by J, we denote this by A, we denote this by N, we denote this by C. Then why don't we denote it by C, people? And why with this random symbol? Okay, let me answer you. So I can write 2 joules. I can write 10 amperes. I can write 5 newtons. I can write 7 coulombs. But as soon as you write 1 ohm or 2 ohm or 3 ohm, it looks like 10, 20, and 30, people. O looks like 0. And hence it was not convenient to use O, people. And hence they decided that instead of using O, we will use the Greek equivalent of O, which is omega. Which is omega, everybody. And which is what? This. Thank you for the claps, Abin. But the story doesn't end here. There is a greater story to this. There is a greater story to this. People, even just like we have capitals and small in English, A, B, B, we have capitals and small in Greek as well. Just say sigma, sigma, theta, theta. Okay. Similarly, omega and omega. The question is, then why did they use this symbol and not this? Because, people, it is the name of a scientist, and we have learned that if at all you denote SI unit after a name of the person, then you have to use capital J, capital A, capital N, and hence capital omega, everybody, and not small omega. Aperialization. This is capital omega, people. This is capital omega. Okay. Anyway, so wherever this was again another ghoda for the day. Let us jump to our tree. Yes. So this was sigma. Huh? So why did I teach you the SI unit of conductivity? Because I want to derive SI unit for mobility, people. So sigma is any mu. Sigma is any mu, right? So what is SI unit for conductivity, people? It is ohm inverse meter inverse, right? And what is SI unit for N? Meter minus 3. We have already learned SI unit for N is, everybody, meter minus 3. Hai na? What is SI unit of charge? Coulomb. So what will be SI unit of mu? Let us find. Okay. So ohm inverse meter inverse upon meter minus 3 into Coulomb. This is, people, mobility mu. Okay. This is mobility mu. So you can simply say that mobility mu is Coulomb inverse, ohm inverse, meter minus 3 goes up, people. Minus 3 goes up. 3 minus 1 becomes plus, meter square. So Coulomb inverse, ohm inverse, meter square, people. Coulomb inverse, ohm inverse, meter square. Okay. Coulomb inverse, ohm inverse, meter square. Achha, wait. Before we take a question, an entrance trick, people. Trick. Yes, we have learned that sigma is conductivity of electrons plus conductivity of holes, which is E into Ne mu E plus NH mu H. Can you just go back and check the question that we solved? Please check the first question. Please check the first question that we solved. I think we had a p-type semiconductor in it. P-type semiconductor. Can you check what was the value of Ne and what was the value of NH? Can you please check the question that we solved? The first question. Can you check the value of Ne and NH? Do you see that NH is very, very, very much greater than any people? Do you see that? If you see that, then please give me a thumbs up. I think NH was of order 10 raised to 22 and Ne was of the order 10 raised to 10. Right? NH was very much greater than Ne, everybody. NH was very much greater than Ne. Then don't you think that for p-type people, for p-type, you can simply approximate sigma s, you can ignore any, this is 10 raised to 10, you can ignore any people, you can simply write E into NH into mu H. It won't make a difference, people. It won't make a difference because this value will be negligible as comparatively to the whole value, everybody. It will be negligible as comparatively to the whole value. Is that clear? Did you understand the approximation? Because NH is everybody very, very, very much greater than Ne. And similarly, can I write for N-type, sigma can be approximated as E into Ne into mu E. But this is only approximated values, people. Please don't, this value is of more importance. This is of more importance. But at times, if it is a numerical question, then you can, just use this value directly. For this is for p-type and this is for n-type, everybody. So the question was asked in BHU 2015, people, Banaras Hindu University. Now it is IIT BHU, like you all know. The question is the conductivity of a germanium doped, germanium is a semiconductor, right? Germanium doped with phosphorus with impurity concentration is this much. Okay, so this is, people, concentration of germanium doped phosphorus with impurity concentration. Now tell me one thing. Phosphorus, it falls under PAN. PAN comes under N-type. It comes under N-type, people. Okay, so what is this? N-type, it has number of electrons greater than number of holes. So this is what, people? This is number of electrons, because one phosphorus atom, it will donate one free electron, everybody. So they have given us Ne. Ne is given to us. It is how much? 4.41 into 10 raised to 14 centimeter minus 3 per centimeter cube. Or you can write it 1 upon centimeter cube, which is per centimeter cube. You can write it however. Okay. Achha, now the question is, sir, should we convert CGS into SI? Well, actually we should, but just look at the option. Options are in centimeter, people. Since options are in centimeter, please do not convert centimeter into meter. Since options are already in centimeter, please do not convert centimeter into meter. Okay. And they have given us the intrinsic carrier concentration. It is how much? Ni is given to us as 2.5 into 10 raised to 13 centimeter minus 3. And electron mobility, mu E is given to us at, it is how much? 3800. Now this is another unit of it, centimeter square per upon volt second. So this is also unit. Like I said, there are different units of mobility, people. This is one of the units. And mobility of holes is also given to us. It is 1800 centimeter square per volt second. So data is already with us, people. Please just note down the data first. Ne is here, Ni is here, mu E is here, and mu H is also here. So there are two methods to solve this. Method one is the elongated method. Sigma, it is what? E into Ne into mu E plus NH into mu H. NH into mu H. Okay. So I know the value of E. What is E, everybody? 1.6 into 10 raised to minus 19. I know the value of Ne, I know the value of mu E, and I also know the value of mu H. But what is the value of NH then? What is the value of NH? We can calculate Ne into NH is Ni square, and I can find NH from here. Correct? I can find NH from here, and I can substitute it here, and I can get the value of sigma. Is this clear? Is this clear so far? You can calculate NH from this formula. You can calculate NH from this formula, and you can substitute it here, and you can then calculate sigma. But let's not do this much. I have already given you the trick, people. Look at the values. The values are very much away. I mean, these are 0.27, 0.03, 0.05, 0.42. The values are quite far, people. So let us just use the approximated formula. This is which type? Phosphorus is, people, N type. So in N type, number of electrons are greater than number of holes. So I can simply use the approximated formula. Sigma can be written as Ne into mu E into E. I can ignore the whole part. And see the magic, people. What is Ne? Ne is 4.41 into. Achha, let me use the whiteboard. Wait, let me calculate it here. Yeah. It is 4.41 into 10 raised to 14. This is Ne. What is mu E? What is the mobility of electrons? 3800. And what is charge of electrons, people? 1.6 into 10 raised to minus 19. So let's calculate them. So this is, let us bring all the numbers together. 4.41 into 1.6. 4.41 into 1.6. And now let us calculate the, and then let us write 3800. And what is the power? 10 raised to. 10 raised to 14 into 10 raised to minus 19. So 14 minus 19, people, this is minus 5. 14 minus 19, this is minus 5. You can approximate this. 4.4 into 1.6. Approximately this will be, I think so, something around 7. 4.4 into 1.6, something around 7, everybody, correct? Let me know if at all I go wrong. Something around 7 into 3800 into 10 raised to minus 5. Let us approximate this again. You can simply say that this is 7 into 3800 can be written as. Achha, by the way, in IIT Exam you have the calculator here. You can use the calculator. Obviously, right now I don't have the calculator, so I'm just approximating this. So 3800 can be written as 4000 into 10 raised to minus 5. Into 10 raised to minus 5. And what is 4 into 7, people? 4 into 7 is 28. So this is 28,000 into 10 raised to minus 5, or I can say this is 0.28, everybody. Answer is option A. Bingo. Great. For your satisfaction, people, I want you to do a homework in this case. Please also calculate the elaborated value. Use this later after we are done with the class. Please also use this formula, E into mu E into Ne plus mu H into NH. Find NH, substitute NH, and then calculate just to find what is the difference between the two values. Just to find what is the difference between our approximated value and the original value. Is that clear, everybody?